can't hear you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Orange Plate Special. We're delighted that you're taking part of your lunchtime today to be with us. I'm Mark Blakeman. I'm the Marilyn and Carl Toma Executive Director of the McKnight Center for the Performing Arts at Oklahoma State University. I'm streaming from the stage of our recital hall here at the McKnight Center, and we have two wonderful guests joining us today. Some of you know I'm a recovering trumpet player, so I'm especially excited to talk to these two members from Canadian Brass, Brandon Ridenour and Jeff Nelsen. Thanks, gentlemen, for being with us. We appreciate very much you taking the time to talk to us. You know, Canadian Brass has such an incredible international reputation and has been heralded as the world's most famous brass ensemble. And for those who are watching who might not know, I can't imagine anyone wouldn't, but could one of you maybe, or both of you, give us a very short history on the ensemble or how it got started and when?
Well, I think Jeff would be the perfect person.
We've just figured out how we're going to do this back and forth. Who's taking what question? Thank you, Brandon. Yes, they started in 1970, and we're members of the Hamilton Philharmonic, and then we're doing some outreach engagement concerts for schools. And as Chuck Dallenbach, founding member, says, they're the first, maybe only group that paved their way to Carnegie Hall through doing school concerts and starting through that. But they enjoyed doing the concerts and connecting to audiences on that level. And now we're in our 50th year. There's some big moments along the way. In 1977, Canadian government was going to send, I think it was the National Ballet, to China, and there was some discussions on that was going to be way too many people to keep together and in China. So they sent the quintet, and it was a big hit, and they were the first Western music behind the Iron Curtain in China in 77, then the Tonight Show, and then groups were still flying 50 years later.
Still going strong. 50
Not
years.
to say that the ballet wasn't deserving. They're very on point ensemble.
Ooh, that's right. Well said.
Very nice. Very nice.
But we have our own ballet that we did. So.
That's true. Right.
50 years is an incredible statement, I think, about the strength of the ensemble and the format. What is it, do you think, that really contributes to that longevity to be around for 5 decades? That's pretty incredible.
Well, probably the trumpet players are the reason why. No, I only kid. I'm also a recovering trumpet player. I think all trumpet players are recovering.
You never really quite recover.
Right. We have to deal with a lot. It's just sort of an ongoing thing that we have assumed.
There was a question, Brandon. Can you get
that's right, the question. So I think the Canadian Brass has been able to sustain 50 years because they haven't really stayed the same. Once they learned more or less a formula of what would work and how to connect, as Jeff said, first with young people, it was just a matter of continuing to sort of come up with different equations within that formula. And a big part of that, I would say, is the repertoire that was written for brass quintet, specifically for Canadian Brass. There's just a huge arsenal of both arrangements and original compositions that were written for the group that I believe really set not just Canadian Brass apart from other brass groups, but apart from a lot of other ensembles. I think that the repertoire that they were playing and how they played it really brought this essential uniqueness to the group that allowed it to have a 50-year career.
Yeah, I've read in the bio, and of course as a former trumpet player, have played some of those arrangements, but I think it said 600 commissions and arrangements have come through the ensemble, acting as a catalyst for that repertoire, which is an incredible amount of music, and it really has from my perspective, when I was a young trumpet player, I mean, it really was inspirational to see a group that was playing at such a high level and touring, and it was unique, I think, at the time. You know, I don't think people thought of brass quintet, you know, performing, entertaining, concertizing in that same kind of way. So it's really been.
The other unique part, as you alluded to, is that you said the word entertaining just now. And that was something that also set Canadian Brass apart from other ensembles, was that the group was never afraid to really communicate and get close to the audience. They weren't afraid to be called entertainers, whereas perhaps other groups really wanted to keep that wall between the music they were making and the audience. Canadian Brass really prided itself in the introductions to pieces to let a general audience into the inner workings of how this piece goes or why this piece might be special.
Yeah, it's a great rich history, obviously, and certainly I think one of the hallmarks of the Canadian Brass is its ability to really connect with the audience. And I understand, I think that you're embracing a lot of technology, the ensemble, you know, and finding ways to continue to connect with folks through digital platforms and smartphone apps and things like that, which is really fantastic.
We're doing our best.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. Brandon, I wanted to ask you about what I read was you had joined the ensemble very early on in your career, and then went away for some period of time, and now you've rejoined. I'm not sure how long you've been back with the group at this point, and I wanted to ask you about what you were doing in the interim, because I know you have other interests, obviously, in your life as well.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to remember 1970, the beginning of the group, because I wasn't around. But I joined the group once I'd sort of formed somewhat of an embouchure in 2006, and I played with them till 2013. And yes, it's true, I left for a few years. I came back about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago last summer. And sorry, was the question, what was I doing? What was I thinking? Why did I leave in the first place? How could it be so foolish?
What were you thinking?
Well, there were so many tugs and pulls to at least try some other things, and I felt like it was important for me to discover a lot of things within myself and entertain at least the idea. I felt like I needed to at least go try to do some of these things, and I did the best I could. I tried to adapt some more repertoire for solo trumpet, and had a mild career playing solo concerts and touring with my father, who's a pianist, and some other pianists as well. So I was trying to expand that repertoire, but I was also trying to kind of, I guess, tear open a bit this traditional classical mindset from a presenter standpoint, which is something that Canadian Brass already prided itself in doing. So I continued to try to arrange things for various mixed groups, kind of bridging the pop world with the classical world. I felt like it was important for both sides to absorb some things from each other. So I know that sounds very broad, but I did some other work, starting some other ensembles of mixed instruments and incorporating other vocalists and singer-songwriters into such projects. I started a group called Founders, which is a mixed quintet that does just that. We function more like a band, but we all play classical instruments. And there's singing. Everybody does some singing within the group as well. Trying to basically just infuse many different things together. It's
Sounds very innovative. A lot of innovation there.
And what's been great about that too is when Brandon came back, that's pervasive in his arrangements for us now, and what he brings to the group that he always did, but another level of contributing his 1/5 of what Canadian Brass is, you know, and that's the big thing for your audience and your listeners here are wondering about how that works with Canadian Brass, that's, as Brandon said, one of the great things about Canadian Brass, that it's 5 people, 5 personalities that the audience really gets to share in, you know. Yeah.
And Jeff, I was going to ask, you play horn in the ensemble. How long have you been a member of Canadian Brass?
I think this is my 11th year total. I joined, I was 3 weeks old when 1970 started, so I'm the anniversary baby. I'm also 50, and but I don't remember. I joined in 2000, and then I left 5 years later to get married and settle down and try and not tour, but that didn't happen. So I went around doing concerti and things like that. And then I rejoined once I started teaching at IU for another 3 years, and then my wife got pregnant, so we had a child, and I left again, and then I came back 2 years later, now that my 2 kids are old enough. And my wife kind of looked at me and said, "It's good to have you home, but I think I miss missing you."
So you both have had a couple of stints as members, but you know, cumulatively have spent quite a bit of time in the ensemble, and it's a very busy, I'm sure, touring schedule, lots of travel, lots and lots of performances. I'm just curious if you find it challenging at times to kind of keep things fresh, or if there's something that you do personally or in the way that you approach it, or is it an ensemble that really doesn't struggle with that?
Depends on definition of struggle. You know, I think it's the demands of us playing the best concert that all 5 of us can all at once and for 2 hours at a time. That keeps it pretty fresh with all day, every day, wondering, what is it I should be? Oh, I could go practice some more. And I don't arrange, luckily for the group. So Brandon's got those juices flowing too and keeps it very fresh. Caleb arranges, Achilles and Chuck, we're all collecting music and then deciding on themes and projects and our educational initiatives. And it keeps itself pretty fresh because we love the group and we love our potential to give value to the world. So we're constantly energized by that.
You mentioned a couple of times now the youth concerts early on in the history of the ensemble, and just now about the educational work that you do. And I know that you both are very passionate about education. Jeff, I think you're teaching at Indiana right now. Can you tell us a little bit about the education programs that Canadian Brass has, and how, in what ways it is that you're trying to connect with young performers?
Well,
Sure, I think, go ahead. We love going into and all educational environments all around the world and get to be example of performance, of sharing. And we like coming in, we can talk about the technical aspects, but we trust that they're getting lessons in their schools and coachings on those technical aspects. So we try and work on the level above that of transcending technique and getting into telling musical stories and sharing of themselves. And especially the most important thing is what Brandon's about to say.
Yes. So you all can check back in now, because what Jeff really meant to say was, you know, right now is so, of course, different for everyone, which is challenging now. As soon as you get, you know, less than 6 feet away from anyone, people tend to get a little upset. So we've learned we can't do that right now.
You should shower, Brandon.
I would say, I figured it, you know, in a Zoom meeting, no one would notice. But you know, that was our direct impact in the education world. Was, I would say, about every other concert we would play would include some sort of master class or a children's concert or something of that nature, where we're having some sort of impact in the education world. But right now, it's definitely shifted to virtual. So we all have to think of new ways in which we can assist this education world. And I know that I've been thinking about it more than I ever have right now. And I guess I would like to take this time to say that if we as performers can allow ourselves to get out of this performer mentality just for, at least for right now, and still give back to the education world. It's something that we can, I think, have much more impact and effect on if we're willing to do this. Because the thing that we can't do is perform and get into places close together. I would like to encourage all performers to, at least for the time being, shift your thinking into the education world, because there's a real need for that right now, and we have a responsibility to give to these young students. If we don't inspire them right now, then it's going to be a lot tougher for all of us down the road. We talk about music appreciation a lot. If we can shift our mentality again towards education, I think that inspiring these young people to have an appreciation for music won't be so much of a problem. So I know I for one, am really trying to develop some new things with educational materials, TBA, but I am working on something.
Very nice, very nice. Have you, as an ensemble, have you been working remotely, obviously, on some projects that you're sharing through digital channels, through social channels and things like that? As performers, have you been doing some things independent and then producing those together and sharing them out? And
yeah, we have, and again, it's so different now because we have to record all of our parts separately from home, sometimes to a click track or something pre-existing for us to lay everything on top of each other. So that's certainly challenging and not how we're used to doing things, but we are learning all sorts of new software programs, from Logic to Final Cut, so we can do our own videos. And Canadian Brass has, we have our own Facebook and Instagram and our website where everything that we release can be seen on these places. And we've started a new platform, or it's new to us. It's called Patreon. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. And on Patreon, that's where we've decided to release all of our things earlier there. Whatever we create will first be released on Patreon to our patrons there before we release any of our tracks or videos to the rest of the world. But on Patreon, we are also providing more educational content as well. So if anybody wants to subscribe to that, they can find that there if they want to have little.
I want to subscribe. Sounds awesome.
So yeah, we're definitely trying to stay active on all of those platforms.
That's great. I mean, it's been interesting watching what artists are doing under the circumstances, you know, some of real interesting creativity that's coming forward during this difficult time, and just seeing some really unique things happening in the digital realm. It's been a lot of fun to see what people have been able to come up with. I wanted to ask, you both have some other really interesting passions, and I wanted to ask you guys about this. I'm curious to learn how these things play into your role as a performing musician as well. But Brandon, you do some sketch comedy and improvisational comedy and comedy training, and you know, how does that serve you also as a professional musician as well, and how does that kind of tie together for you?
Yeah, definitely. I took courses with Upright Citizens Brigade in improvisation and also sketch writing. And well, in the improvisation course, it really gets you out of any kind of box that you might be in, because what you have to work with when you're in any improvisation is sort of unknown. You're developing it in the moment, or you're taking a little clue or suggestion from the audience. You have no chance to prepare anything. However, you do have sort of a set amount of rules that you can abide by if you want to. And I would say that all the skills that I learned there through UCB really come into play when you are talking about staying in the moment in a performance and staying reactive to things, and never, as soon as you are a performer or a colleague who has planned every single moment out on stage and in the performance, it leaves no interesting interaction with your colleagues. So I would say that the skills there with improv definitely serve to that idea of staying reactive. And then with the sketch writing, I found that it's really come in handy with creating things. Like last year, I created a sketch for Canadian Brass called the Nutcracker, where we played different characters. I guess what people don't know is that this is the original version of Nutcracker. Had I not already told you that I just wrote it last year.
It's Canadian-y.
But this, yeah, I was just digging and pulling out this thing that already existed that somehow Tchaikovsky got his hands on first. But anyway, yeah, we took, as you might expect, all the music from the Nutcracker, and I messed around with it probably far too much, and then I wrote characters for each of us to play. So there were speaking roles for all of us in the Nutcracker, and of course it takes place in Canada, and it's a journey through Canada that this Nutcracker goes on. So it's definitely come in handy with the writing part too, and yeah.
Does the energy of the audience, to what extent does the energy of the audience or the feedback that you're getting from the audience kind of drive or direct your performance or what you're doing on stage? Does that really play a significant role in the way that a performance unfolds?
For sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it can, and then sometimes it can be a little dangerous relying on it. I think we've been in some really, really big rooms for thousands of people where we can't hear the audience at all. And when we're lacking that, I can feel kind of, wow, we have to dig somewhere else to find the energy. So that's when I notice it a lot, is when I can't hear the audience. But it can absolutely drive, it's a spiral, and it's such a shared thing. That's how we approach performance, is it's not us delivering or regurgitating, but we are sharing that experience with each audience in its unique moment. And that's why I think live performance will always thrive.
Yeah, it's a really great, when it's organic, and it's really, when you feel that connection, there's just no substitute really for that.
I think we all in Canadian Brass listen to or admire stand-up comedians, and I think any stand-up comedian would tell you that they are listening to the audience throughout their entire set, because if you don't, and you don't come back in with that extra second beat to your joke as the applause or laughter is dying down, if you have that timing off as a comedian, it's not going to be a great career for you. So we definitely have learned from a lot of those greats, and the idea of comedic timing and being aware of that is certainly important to us.
Jeff, you, in addition to being a musician, are also a magician. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And I'm curious to know how that aids you in your musical career, or do you find ways to bridge those two things together?
No. I'm not allowed to talk about, that's the magician's code, right? I'm
okay.
Not allowed to. Sorry, I tried humor. Sorry, I should have stuck to magic.
Just pull that dove out of your microphone. Waiting.
It's identical to music in you transcend the technique enough to get into the story, either doing a trick or doing magic and spinning that magic. Sorry, my son is calling. I don't know how to turn it off. Okay. Hi. Like magic, my son feels me thinking about him. And yeah, it's still going forward in that same way and sharing, being above the technique enough to be in the storytelling part of both music and magic. And There might be a explosion here or there in the Canadian Brass show that helps just really further the way Canadian Brass shares with an audience. We start, I don't want to ruin it, but we might start at the back of the hall. So right away at the beginning of the concert, expectations are shifted, and the audience doesn't know what to expect from then on. And magic can add to that as well.
And were you interested in magic as a young person?
Yeah, I was about 12, and I went from Edmonton, Alberta, down to California, and my cousin did some magic, and then I went to the Disneyland magic store, and I was hooked.
Very nice. Very nice.
At the very least, it just secures really nice, consistent reviews from journalists saying that their show is magical. But they mean it literally. But we don't tell, everyone else that.
Subtle.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting. You are both very accomplished musicians, but you have these other interests, and it's really, I think it's interesting to people listening how these other parts of your lives influence what it is that you do on stage as professional musicians. So I want to take a look at some of our questions that we have from viewers, and we'll spend a couple minutes here. So this is from Lynette on Facebook. This is directed toward Jeff. Lynette is a horn player also, and says, "Could you ask him
in town there?
That's
in
right.
Stillwater there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Could you ask him how he has been able to stay motivated during this pandemic, and what he would tell young players?"
Sure. Hi, Lynette. Miss you. Big hugs. I try to stay motivated by setting little projects up, just little, and this is what I did for my students, but also for myself, and is to have just little performance goals, making a video or performing something for someone the following week. And then once those are scheduled, now I have some really good fear to get me off the couch and get me into practicing enough to make that one thing down the road.
Keeps you motivated.
Yeah, I talk a lot about fearless performance, but not all fear is bad. Fear in performance might be destructive, but
Right.
before that gets me to work and motivates me.
So tell us just a little bit about fearless performance, because that's another venture that you're involved in, and you do a lot of speaking and training of people. Can you?
Yeah, it comes from a place of a lot of fear. I fear a lot. I get nervous a lot, so I got pretty tired of walking on stage eager and off stage disappointed. So I was figuring out ways of replacing the fear. It's not about a lack of fear. I still get fear, but I choose things better than fear, like serving the audience and serving the music and giving, and then learning after the performance. So it's all these different ways of equipping myself to be present while on stage, and then preparing well around it, and better each time, hopefully.
So a couple more questions here. We've got one from Harrison, who's 13 years old, and it doesn't say, I assume he plays an instrument, but it doesn't say which one, but he's asking about how do you clean your instruments? So does anybody want to talk just real quickly about maintenance of a brass instrument?
Well, I didn't know you could clean an instrument.
You can, actually.
Great question.
Yeah.
I always thought that's where the good sound came from.
It's supposed to be well seasoned, your instrument, right?
Right. Yeah. You need to have a little bit of, whatever in there to aid in the resistance. So, not like la resistance, but the actual blow to resistance into the horn. I'm not the best to answer how to properly clean your instrument.
Okay.
As long as it looks shiny on the outside, you're good. That's all that matters, right?
Yeah, and make sure that mouthpiece is in the small end. So we use a snake. I don't know if I should share this, but one of our last concerts was with Symphony Nova Scotia, and
not a literal snake, everyone out there.
Seriously? Oh, noted. Yeah, I had to borrow a snake from someone in the horn section of Symphony Nova Scotia to clean my horn at intermission. So we're not the best people to ask about maintenance.
You're on the road a lot, so.
Yeah, there's a YouTube. Google.
Yeah, I'm sure there is a great
I remember
YouTube
on the last
video.
tour, Jeff went to clean his horn, and I think he found his car keys in there or something.
That's right.
What was it?
Awesome. It
At
was
20,
awesome.
I think he found some money.
So
another reason to clean your instrument, you might find a few bucks.
during this downtime, during the quarantine, as we've talked to people, a number of the artists that we visited with have taken the time to find interest and cultivate new hobbies. I'm just curious if either one of you have delved into something new or revisited something that maybe you used to really engage yourself in that you've now found the time to be able to do.
When Brandon said we've been learning about microphones and video and all that, I think I would just say I've been studying it, trying to learn. Those are my hobbies now, is recording, and I have a curtain that goes halfway across my home office. All this stuff that I wouldn't have even considered. I've had so much help. That's my main hobby now.
It makes a lot of sense.
Recording and editing.
Yeah, doing a lot of things at home now, and having the equipment to be able to do that. And is the curtain, is that for acoustic purposes?
It is. It reduces the room noise. I think I've impressed Brandon by sharing the vernacular of recording the studio.
Yeah.
Room noise.
Yeah, it's very technical. I like that. You're learning. Yeah,
How about you, Brandon? Any new hobbies or anything any kind of interest that you've rekindled during the downtime?
Well, I started reading again, so that's good. A little more time to watch Netflix. That's good too, unless you you get to the end of a movie and realize, oh, well, that was a waste of time. There's some movies out there I can tell you to not watch, but that's not what we're here for. I've also learned how to record myself better, and the whole lingo that goes along with Logic is the program that we're all using in Canadian Brass. And also, as I mentioned before, some video editing. I've sort of, it's interesting because when I was younger, before I took up the trumpet, I was really into acting. I always loved the world of film. And now I'm finding myself, even though so much has happened since then, and things have truly evolved, and we're in the world of 4K and just high tech everywhere you look, I found myself kind of jumping back into this world and creating things and being very intrigued by it. It's such a rabbit hole, but as I alluded to before, I've found myself creating some at least ideas and some scripts for some musical educational content. And not to totally spill the beans, but yeah, I'm calling it the music box for now, and what I'm dreaming up is a sort of show that presents music like Bill Nye presented science to kids. So very, very early stages, but that's been sort of a hobby that I've been working on, which I have nothing to show for right now, but hopefully sometime soon.
Well, that gives us something to look forward to for sure. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure taking a few minutes to speak with you here on Orange Plate Special. Canadian Brass will be performing at the McKnight Center on January 30th, 2021. And we do not have single tickets on sale yet, but if you want to get into the queue for buying tickets for the Canadian Brass performance, you can call our box office at 405-744-9999 or send us an email at info@mcknightcenter.org. For those of you watching online, we hope that you will join us next week. That's Wednesday, July 22nd, again at 12 noon Central Time. I'll be talking with Peter Krasinski, who is the improvisational organist from Boston. He performed last Halloween at the McKnight Center, improvising the music to the Phantom of the Opera, the silent film The Phantom of the Opera. And we have Peter scheduled again in our second season. We're really excited. He gave a great performance. We look forward to visiting with him next week, so please join us for that. And we look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday. Thanks so much for following us on Orange Plate Special.
Having us.
Of course,
Looking
thanks for
forward to
having me.
January. Fingers crossed. Yeah.